Okay.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the Tax Resolution Help Center. My name is May. I will be hosting today's session and introducing today's speaker. I will also be coordinating the Q&A chat session at the end of this session. I want to congratulate all of you for taking steps to deal with your taxes. Taxes from all sources, including income tax, payroll tax, property tax, excise tax, and sales tax, represent a 35% to 60% reduction in your personal savings and wealth. As you probably know, those with 1% of the wealth in this country have experts to help them pay a small percent of tax. Our goal is to help you reduce how much you pay in tax by educating and informing you in ways to reduce past, present, and future tax expenses. We think you're entitled to live a happier, healthier life by keeping more of what you earn and getting the taxman off your back. Our goal is to provide you good information with the opportunity to ask questions that are important to you. The presentation itself will last about 20 minutes, plus 20 to 30 minutes for you to ask questions by chat. I will select the questions and present them to today's expert. If you wish, you can include your first name and your state. That would be great. Other than that information, your identity is not mentioned. The information you are receiving in this session is not specific tax advice. If you want specific tax advice for your situation, you are free to contact today's expert or any of our tax experts at Tax Resolution Help Center. As you know, these group sessions are included in your do it yourself membership fee of $20 per month. If you are not yet a member, please sign up today. We need your financial support. And of course, to better understand what might be on your mind during the session, I might include some polling questions to ask you. I will then finish with a 5-minute wrap up. Also, a survey will be sent looking for your feedback. And finally, this session will be recorded. The topic for today's session is dealing with IRS and state tax notices and letters. And the tax expert for today's session is John Shawns. John has the unique perspective of being both a business advisor and business owner. His wide ranging experience can help business owners and employees get through everyone's least favorite topic, tax compliance or the repercussions of non-compliance. With that said, introducing John Shantz.
Thank you, May. And thank you to everybody who is here today. Congratulations on joining the session and wanting to learn a little bit more about taxes, dealing with IRS letters, notices, interest, and penalties. We are going to have a quick review of penalties and notices and interest. First, just a little bit about me, John Shantz. There's my email address and phone number. To call me after the session if you have something you want to talk about more in depth, or something came up that if you asked a question didn't get the complete answer you're looking for, be happy to help you out to the best of my ability. I've spent many years in public accounting. I ran my own land development business for many more years, and I'm back doing some tax and accounting work these days. Um, Love doing that. Love helping people out. And with the Tax Resolution Center, we have some really, really experienced people here with some wide ranging backgrounds that are looking forward to helping people dealing with their tax situations. Um, so today we're going to talk about notice and letter basics, to talk about interest and penalties, and how they're computed when they apply, and how you might get hit with penalties. And we'll touch upon a few other issues with regards to notices and interest and penalties. So when it comes to interest in notices. You may have heard the old adage of, hey, if you catch on fire, God forbid, stop, drop, and roll. Probably the hardest thing to do if you ever catch on fire is stop, drop, and roll. But that's what you're supposed to do. When you get a notice in the mail from the IRS or a state agency, I like to say stop, drop, and read. Stop what you're doing, drop it, and read that notice. Spend a few minutes to try to understand what's going on. Another thing here, if you get a notice in the mail, it usually doesn't mean it's an audit. If it says audit, it'll say audit rate on it. Otherwise, it's just a notice looking for information, looking for additional taxes, maybe charging some interest and penalties. So when you see that letter arrive in the mail, it's completely normal to go, oh my goodness, to get nervous, get worried. Is the IRS going to come knocking on my door? The answer is no. Probably not going to come knocking on the door unless you ignore that notice, unless you don't stop, drop, and read it. This will be a chance for you to learn something. Take a look at your tax return. The notice is going to tell you what year it applies to. Pull out a copy of your tax return. Hopefully you have saved a copy, whether it's a hard copy or a digital copy on your computer. A lot of people use tax software these days to prepare their tax returns. And I would always download a PDF copy of your return. Don't just leave it up to the tax service you use to keep the copy for you. Save one for yourself too. Couple of things to keep in mind. If you get a notice, keep the notice. Don't throw it away. Don't throw it in the back of a drawer somewhere. Put it somewhere where you're going to see it and where you're going to deal with it. Don't let it sit there. Deal with it now. Notices don't get better with time. All you're going to do if you wait too long is incur more interest and penalties if you owe taxes. The notice is going to tell you what type of notice it is. You can go to the IRS website. So if you got let's say a notice that said CP 2000 on it, you could type a Google search IRS CP 2000, take you right to the IRS website, and it'll tell you all about a CP 2000 notice. That notice is going to tell you about the tax year, the date of the notice, and the date to respond. Those are 3 dates you're really going to want to know. You need to know what tax year it applies to, what's the date of the notice, and when do you need to respond to that notice by. It's also going to tell you the tax due and the information required to deal with this notice and how the IRS or the state came up with their tax they may be trying to assess you. So once you get that notice and you know what year it is, you know what type of notice it is, read through that notice and see what's being asked of you. Are they just asking for information? Are they asking for additional taxes? And are they charging you penalties? What if there's a tax due on there, you think you're actually going to owe it and you can't pay it? Think about an installment plan. It's always a possibility. If you qualify to sign up for an installment plan, it's always something you can do. There's more information about installment plans on the IRS website. So again, that's if you agree to the notice and you agree you owe them money. What if you disagree? Gather the information necessary to prove your position. And that's going to take, again, going back to reading the notice, understanding how that notice does or doesn't apply to you, and sending that information back to the IRS saying, hey, you're wrong. The IRS can be wrong. Whenever you correspond with the IRS by mail, always mail it certified mail. So you have a record that you responded to their notice and sent them information. Only way you can prove that you responded is certified mail. So here's just a sample of a notice, what it looks like. This is one type of notice. This happens to be a CP11. It'll say right up here at the top of the notice. Some letters will say it within the letter. You might find it in a different area, like over here where the name and address is. It's going to tell you what tax year this applies to. And You'll see here, there's a quick summary. The amount that's being asked, in this case, $757. Again, the tax notice numbers down here. This is the notice date. That's the date it was sent. And this notice will tell you what you need to do immediately, how you can pay the tax that's due there if you agree with it. If you don't disagree, here's what you can do. In this case, they're giving you a phone number. They're almost always going to have a phone number on that notice. The IRS can be notoriously difficult to get a hold of these days, and almost impossible to get a hold of unless you have a lot of patience and perseverance. Ever since the COVID delay, shutdown, it's been really difficult to get a hold of the IRS. They take a long time to respond to things. So if you do get a notice, you're going to have some patience as well. So here's some payment options showing here. And in this case, you see this was 2019, what they changed on your return. So it's spelling out what happened, why they changed your tax. Here's the tax information you reported. Here's what the IRS is reporting. And then it's also listing the payments that they have on record of you having made, and then how they computed any interest. In this case, just interest, not a penalty showing here. So all that information is going to be on almost any notice you get from the IRS, unless they're just asking for information from you. So again, take the time to read through the notice. There can be a lot here. Most of you aren't familiar with looking at notices all the time. So it may just take a little bit of extra time to read this thing thoroughly and understand what is being asked of you. Interest. The IRS is going to charge you interest on underpayment of taxes. So if you pay your tax late or you owe tax after the due date, you're going to get charged interest. Used to be kind of low. Interest rates have been pretty low for a long time. They've started rising this year, late last year, where that current rate now is 7%. So it's starting to get up to kind of a real number at 7%. If you get a kind of a bigger tax liability, that interest rate can add up a little bit. Typically, the IRS won't remove or reduce interest, even if you have a reasonable cause. Hey, the dog ate my homework. I tried to do the best job on my tax return, made a mistake. I've always done it right. Can I please get the interest reduced? This probably won't work for interest. Penalties, that can work, but for interest, doesn't usually work. And if you put yourself on a payment plan, installment plan with the IRS, you will be charged interest on the balance as you pay it over time. With regards to penalties, there's a number of different penalties the IRS can charge you on past due balances. The biggest ones are the failure to file your tax return on time and the failure to pay penalty. So the failure to file your tax return and failure to pay, those are 5% a month of the balance owed, up to a maximum of 25%. So number one, if you can't pay, I've run across this many times in my career. People say, I couldn't pay the tax, so I just didn't file my return. File your return. Even if you can't pay the tax, file the return, because if you file the return, you can't get hit with the 5% failure to file penalty. You can't pay your tax on time. That's a different thing. Got to do your best to pay the tax you can on time. And if you can't do that, get yourself set up with an installment plan, so at least you can avoid that penalty adding up. There's penalties for for preparing an inaccurate return. So accuracy related penalties, that can be up to 20% of the portion of underpayment due to the negligence or disregard. Don't see that a lot, but just need to be aware of it, that you want to do your best job to prepare an accurate return and not just blatantly ignore the tax law. There's also failure to provide accurate information returns. That's like W-2s, 1099s. There's a lot of different penalties associated with those, and they can get quite substantial if you're failing to file those returns, especially when you have a large number of those returns. And the IRS does charge interest on the penalties. So some other issues you run into, I mentioned this just previously there, information returns, W-2s, 1099s. If you're a small business, you're obligated and you have employees or subcontractors working for you, you do have a responsibility to file W-2s and 1099s. You may have sales tax responsibilities. If you collect sales tax, file those returns on time. Sales tax penalties can be quite substantial and can add up quickly. And the same thing applies here with payroll, sales tax, quarterly estimates. File the return, even if you can't pay the sales tax. Get the returns filed. Same thing with payroll. If you can't get the taxes paid, get the return filed, because those failure to file penalties really can eat up some money. And then a lot of the things I'm mentioning here is IRS. If you get a notice from the IRS and it does turn out that you owe money, don't forget the state impact. If they're assessing additional tax on income that wasn't reported or some deduction that's being disallowed, you're going to have to take that into account on your state return. So don't forget to file an amended state return to pay any state taxes you might owe. So that's really a quick run through of notices and penalties. Notices and penalties can be pretty unique for everybody. Everybody's case is just a little bit different. So I wanted to make you aware of the interest and penalty charges and kind of what a notice looks like. So you have a little familiarity with that. So it's just a quick summary of everything again. Stop, drop, and read. Don't let it sit around. Don't let it get old. IRS charges interest on the tax due. Penalties, sometimes you can get those abated if you've been good in your tax filing, your whole tax filing life. A lot of times you can get penalties abated, especially during with all the COVID stuff that caused delays for people. But interest, you're not going to be able to get rid of. Always file a timely return, even if you can't pay the tax. I've said that 3 or 4 times already, and that's the most important thing you can do to avoid penalties. Sometimes you don't have the money to pay the tax, get the returns filed. If you don't pay the tax when you file that return, the IRS isn't coming after you any harder. You're not going to be on the bad boy list or bad girl list. Just get the return filed. If, you're a person who's getting notices all the time, this is a habitual, you're getting substantial balances, penalties, or maybe an actual audit, that's kind of the time you might want to really think about seeking professional help and figuring out what's going on, what you can change to improve what you're doing with tax compliance. And that's pretty much all I have to add. Let's chat. If you got any questions, let's go. We'll see what we can do about answering those.
Yes, thank you for that, John. Yes, we do have a question here. This is from one of our attendees in Zoom, from Jim. And his question is, I have an underpayment penalty for underreported income. I was told I can get a one-time penalty abatement. Does this work for underreported income?
Jim, I always say it's worth trying. If you have an underpayment penalty, let me think about this for a second. Underpayment penalty, we talk about interest and penalties. In the IRS terminology, interest is really a penalty. So if you have an underpayment of taxes, they're assessing you, quote unquote, penalty. It's really that 7% interest rate. I would try to get it abated and say, hey, I forgot to report this income on my return. It was an oversight. Um, and put it in those words that it was, this income was inadvertently left off my return. I've always reported my income properly in the past. Never received a notice before from you. Could I respectfully request that you abate the underpayment penalty? Give it a shot and see what they do.
Okay, thank you for that answer, John. So basically, then it will depend our discretion of the IRS if they can abate that.
Um, they always have the option to abate it. A lot, underpayment penalties are kind of tough to get abated, but it's worth taking a shot. I always, the worst thing they can do is say no, and you're in the same position you were before. So it's always worth asking.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Yes, and we do have another question here. This is from our Facebook Live audience. And the question is there a set deadline for responding to IRS letters? And what happens if there is one and I fail to meet the deadline? Can I request for an extension?
Yes, there's a deadline. Yes, you can ask for an extension. So that goes back to when you get the notice, there'll be a deadline in that notice. It'll be the date the notice was sent, won't necessarily be the date you received it. And within that notice, it's going to tell you the date you need to respond to it by. So if it says, please respond by April 15th, that's your deadline.
Oh,
One kind of standard practice, when you get that notice, hey, call them up and say, it's going to take me a while to get my information together. I'm going on vacation. I got 4 kids, whatever it is. They don't have to have a great excuse. Just say, I need some more time. They'll almost always give it to you.
hmm.
If you miss the deadline, even if you get, so 2 things. If you get an extension and you owe the tax, you're just accumulating more interest and penalties potentially. If you miss the deadline and you didn't get an extension, kind of the same answer. You're just accumulating more interest and penalties. At some point, if you just ignore the notice for an excessively long time, you could end up at the point where the IRS says, hey, you owe this money. We are going to lien your bank account or something like that. And you certainly don't want to get yourself in that position.
Okay. All right. That's a great answer. At least they know now. Thank you, John. All right. So, one more question here. This is related, actually. This is from Facebook also. I've been calling the IRS, but I could not reach anyone. You mentioned that earlier, that it's hard to get someone.
Right?
And then his question is it all right to visit them instead? Is
Yes, you can try. If you got an IRS office where you are and you want to try to visit them, you can. Um, I would take a look at it, not knowing what type of notice it is and what they have in it. Um, it might be simpler to just respond to the notice by mail, as I discussed, by certified mail.
mm,
It is very difficult to get a hold of them. Our recommendation is usually, hey, you try first thing in the morning, 7 a.m., try to call them. As I mentioned, it's really hard to get a hold of them. I've heard of people who have, so you can keep trying. But if you got a deadline you're dealing with there, I would mail something in,
mm,
and then second choice would be go into the office.
yes.
But usually those are by appointment, so
Oh,
it's kind of a tough call.
okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for that answer. Well, I guess then the back question of all of this is that is there a chance for them, let's say if they get the penalty, they cannot avoid it with all of the questions, the summary. Um, is there specific or is there any reasons that IRS will abate the interest or the penalty? Do they have a list of that? That
There's there's no list that I've ever seen.
so,
Um, Usually it comes down to if you've, if it's this is the first time you're getting hit with some type of penalties, is
mm,
to ask. And a lot of times they will abate it, especially if it's kind of just an honest mistake. Um, I forgot this. I got this form late. What I got I missed it. I missed this 1099. I didn't realize I got it. Um, it was inadvertent. Nobody tried to do anything. You did the best you could. They're pretty lenient with that. If you listen here and there, there's certainly a lot of people in Washington D.C. who hate to see people get hit with penalties. Uh, the IRS has gotten a little friendlier and a little more lenient with some of the penalties, especially during COVID. So if you are ever going to get penalties abated, this is kind of the time. Maybe that time's moving away now, but I've certainly had my share of seen my share of notices where we just go, hey, here's the tax, here's the interest. I respectfully request you abate these penalties. I've always filed timely before. Please, please, please. And usually they do. A lot of times they do.
okay. All right. That's great to know then. Thank you so much. And we do have one last question. This is actually from Kelly, CEO of Tax Resolution Help Center. Kelly is asking, Kelly wants to know if it's true that everyone listening or watching should join Tax Resolution Help Center for only $19.95 per month.
Well, Kelly, of course they should. It's a great deal. As I said, we've got lots of great people here. Uh, we're providing this education to people because everybody wants to try to do it themselves. I think that's a great thing. We are 100% behind that. Do it yourself to the best of your ability when you can. We're here to educate you so you can do it yourself. And we're also here if you get to the point where, hey, someday you really need a tax expert on your side in your back pocket. We're here to back you up if you ever get to that point as well. And we love providing this education. A lot of us have been around this business for a long time, got a lot of knowledge, and we'd love to share it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that answer. It's a good answer from Kelly. All right. That's the last question that we have for this session. Anything else that you want to add?
Just thank everybody for attending. Appreciate the questions. Uh, Deal with those notices if you get them. I'm sorry. If you do get a notice, you have to deal with it. I hope this session helped you out a little bit. And again, you're welcome to call me, pick my brain, and if it becomes an extended deal, we'll talk about that. But I think a lot of things people are dealing with, um, it can be just a quick thing, give you some confidence to move forward and deal with this on your own. So I wish everybody the best. And again, thank you for attending.
All right. Well, thank you also, John, for taking your time to share your knowledge and giving us a real life examples. We are learning a lot of this session, including me. Thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful day today.
Thank you, man. Same to you.
All right. Well, I want also to thank everyone for taking the time joining to our session. Our goal is to make sure that we help you with your taxes. And our commitment is also to help you reduce your taxes and increase your wealth. We do this with a try tax method of DIY or do it yourself, DIT, do it together, and DIA, do it all. Three methods, one solution. Reduce stress from no IRS or state tax debt and a happier, healthier life. If you are not yet a member, please join for less than $20 per month. We need your support to continue to offer more of these sessions. Since it is now tax season, we have many sessions to help you do a better job of doing your taxes yourself. And of course, if you want help, we have a team of experts who can do your tax return for you. Please check our website at taxresolutionhelpcenter.com and please join as a member today for only $19.95 per month. And again, thank you all for attending the session. Have a wonderful day.